It's May 1st. A lot of people have their rent or their mortgage due today. And for most Americans, that is the biggest expenditure they make every month. And for about 28% of Americans, it's more than a third of their pre-tax income, which housing advocates say is a strain. It's something that they call rent burdened. So with that big of a problem at a time of such a big economic crisis, there are advocates out there that are saying, you know what, we should just cancel the rent. I mean, rent is, on average, rent and mortgages amount to about $1,500 a month. You're seeing a big push from the progressive side of the House and from outside progressive groups. If you think of the Squad, which are typically, the poster women of progressive House members, you have Ilhan Omar, who introduced a bill which has been supported by several other members, including the heads of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And the bill basically says cancel rent. As of this bill, if it were to pass and be signed by the president, which by the way is very, very unlikely, what it says is that people would not have to pay their rent or their mortgages during the time of the pandemic, and it would set up funds in order to compensate landlords and financial institutions that collect that rent and mortgage money. In the CARES Act, there was a provision that said, if you have a mortgage, you can go to your mortgage lender and say, I'm having difficulty because of the pandemic, I need a pause, and they have to say yes. And right now, the statistics up until now say that 7% of mortgage home owners have done that. So, and those are for federally backed mortgages only. So what the mortgage providers are saying, though, is some of them are saying, you know what, no problem, that's fine. You have a 30-year mortgage, you can't pay for 3 months. We're going to take that and tack it on to the end, and it'll be a 30-year and 3-month mortgage, and that's how we'll take care of this. But others are saying, hey, wait a minute, we have a certain amount of money that we need in our coffers so that we don't go under. So yeah, you don't have to pay rent for the next, let's say, 3 months, but when that 3 months is up, you need to pay it all at once. And a lot of people are saying, hey, I just lost my job. I just lost my income. There's a lot of trouble in the economy right now. How am I supposed to come up with 3 months of rent and pay it all at once at the end of 3 months? The whole idea now is that I don't have that money, not that I'm gonna have it in a couple of weeks.
I mean, 86% saying they're confident. That seems like a relatively good number, but I think when it comes to housing, that's one of those ones where you really want to see 95% of Americans saying that they're confident, because the 14% that is not confident in this Hill-HarrisX poll, that's 1 in 6, 1 in 7 Americans who are saying they're not confident in their ability to pay for their housing. And if you look at particular subgroups, it's even higher. So among 18 to 34-year-olds, younger people, it's 20%. So it's 1 in 5 18 to 24-year-olds or 34-year-olds are concerned about not being able to pay for housing. African Americans, it's 28%, so a quarter. And people who are have a household income under $75,000, it's 21%. So again, 1 in 5. And for things like housing, small numbers percentage-wise can actually add up to be pretty large populations. Because remember, the United States is 300 million people. 20% of that is a huge number of people. You're talking 60, 70 million Americans. Who are worried about being able to pay their rent or their mortgage. Like, that is a significant and severe potentially impact if you have this population that is, unable to pay their rent, getting evicted, God forbid, that kind of thing. It's really, really impactful, even if it does seem like a small number at the top line level.
So 14% of Americans right now say they're not confident that they'll be able to pay their rent or mortgage in the month of May. This is even higher than during the 2008 financial crisis. I looked at some previous polls conducted at that time, and in September of 2008, only 9% were not confident that they could pay their mortgage or rent. So it's almost 1.5 times that level. So if we thought 2008 was bad, we're heading into something far worse. And I think people are realizing that looking at the unemployment numbers, the millions of people filing for unemployment is just so far beyond what we saw in 2008. We can imagine similar things happening in the housing market. So to be clear, it appears that the anxiety around people's ability to pay their mortgage and rent is worse today than it was in 2008.
So right now, that's not what people are concerned about in terms of what's been happening in the economy. But, and part of that has to do with changes that have happened in the financial system since that crisis. There were a lot of new laws and regulations put in to make sure that the same thing didn't happen. But that last crisis did start in the housing market with people not being able to pay their mortgages, and that swept through the entire financial system. So there is a fear that further down the line, something like that could eventually happen. And the people that are against these sort of cancellation policies are saying, you have to be careful. This can only go so far before it starts affecting the bank's balance sheets and the service providers' balance sheets, and eventually trickle into the rest of the economy. So that's not where we are right now, but there are some people that are warning that further down the line, it might be a cause for concern.